I totally can't believe it, but here we are for episode 2. Are you with me? Well, hello. Welcome back to WheelTrish Knits My Life in Yarn. This is episode 2. Can you believe it? 2 episodes. I am so excited, and right off the bat, I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for the positive feedback and encouragement that you gave me. And so let's see what happens this week. First of all, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about my yarny backstory. I alluded to some of it last week, but I thought maybe I should tell you a bit more about how I eventually found my way here. My grandmother was an avid crocheter. She learned to crochet from her grandmother who raised her, and she was very talented. When I was about 7 years old, I asked her to teach me. My aunt was also involved in the teaching that day, and basically they had me starting as a lot of little kids do. I was doing finger crochet of a long chain snake. Well, I did that for about a day and got totally bored with it. So my grandmother decided to dig out a crochet hook and some spare yarn for me, and she taught me how to make the chain with a hook, and then we moved on to single crochet, and then the rest is history. I started by making a lot of really crooked doll blankets. In fact, eventually I started making them triangular on purpose because I knew they were uneven. But my little dolls didn't care, and I was pretty proud of myself. I started crocheting bigger things like Afghans and baby blankets when I was maybe 12 or 13. Um, in general, I spent my summer vacations crocheting. We would go and visit my aunt um, on my mom's side, a couple of hours away, and we'd spend about a week there. And we'd stop at a store that was kind of like a Walmart, but it wasn't a Walmart because it was so long ago. And we'd pick up yarn on the way down to visit my aunt, and my stepsisters and I would sit and crochet for the entire week while we visited and did other things. I did that a couple of times, and then I made some baby blankets for people. And in fact, um, last week after posting my first episode, there was somebody who replied to one of my Facebook posts that she had saved a blanket that I made for her 40 years ago, and she posted to me a photo of her now grown son and his first baby with my baby blanket. And oh my goodness, it was so touching to see that and know that they treasured the blanket for so many years. Of course, I'm not sure how I feel about being old enough that I could have made something in my early 20s that someone then saved for 40 plus years. Oh my gosh. Time flies when you're having fun, and sometimes even when you're not. So here I am. I'm certainly not 21 years old anymore, but um, I've done lots of yarny work uh, between then and now. Um, I was a crocheter only for probably the first 36, 37 years of my life. And then my sister-in-law uh, was expecting a baby, and I wanted to make sure that I got something done for her really quickly. And I wound up injuring my wrist because, of course, I couldn't just do a plain baby blanket. I had to crochet cables and bubbles and all kinds of fancy things into it. And it kind of killed my hand. So from that moment on, I really couldn't do the twisting motion involved in crochet anymore. Eventually, about 8 or 9 months later, I picked up knitting, and I had tried knitting in the past, but I only ever used, acrylic yarn and steel needles like you can get at Walmart. Um, and the single pointed needles, when I would get down to the last 2 or 3 stitches of a row, would slide out of the needle and hit the floor and then roll under the table. And of course, when that happened, I wasn't ever able to pick up the knitting needle myself, and so my knitting would be done at that moment. And I decided that maybe knitting wasn't for me at that point. But then I discovered the miracle of circular needles. I saw a lady knitting hats at a craft fair with a circular needle, and I was just blown away. I said, "What is that thing, and how does it work?" And so she showed me, and I came home and I bought myself a set of circular needles. To me, they're like having needles on a leash, so they don't hit the floor if my stitches inevitably slip off the needle. And so I was able to figure out how to keep going when that happened. And it changed my world. And I've never looked back. As I mentioned last week, that was about in late 2003 when that happened. And I first started by, I had seen the lady in the craft fair knitting a hat. So first thing I knitted was a hat, and then I made a scarf to go with it. And they were made out of some pink and purple red heart yarn. Um, and I had given them to my um, 6-year-old daughter at the time, or maybe she was 7. I can't remember. Anyway, and then I started making lots of hats. I got into knitting felted hats, and I did that for a few years. And then I just started knitting lots of different things, and now I mostly knit large projects like blankets and things. Don't ask me why, because I have a fairly short attention span, and um, many of the blankets that I've started over the years have never been finished. But I seem to be making good progress on my current blanket. So I'm going to count that as a win so far. I'm pretty determined to be able to finish my current project. Anyway, so I guess I might as well show you my progress for this week. Um, Here is my Twinkle Dimple progress keeper, and I just love it. It's gorgeous, and this shows you where I was last week and where I'm headed before the end of tomorrow evening. It's currently um, Saturday, June 20th, and I will move the marker on the 21st after meeting with my Sunday night Zoom group. Um, anyway, so I'm really happy with that progress. No, I didn't cast on my 4th of July socks yet. I'm hoping to do that before the 4th of July, but we'll see. Um, I'm kind of having mixed emotions about patriotism this year, but we won't get into that. So um, they're waiting in the wings until I'm inspired to cast them on. Anyway, so one of the things that happened as a result of last week was that a friend of mine, Sue, from my Sunday night knit group, asked me if I could share the podcasts that I watch regularly on YouTube, since I mentioned that I watch so many of them. Um, are we ready for this? Because I've been jotting down my list for a couple of days and it's pretty long. Um, and for the most part, they're not in a huge particular order. However, the ones that I mentioned first are probably the ones that I do not uh, ever miss. So here we go. First, I want to mention the Love in Stitches podcast by Natalie, Nitty Natty. I've been watching that for um, probably 4 or 5 years, and I love um, watching her adventures with her husband Kent and their uh, four-footed friend Toaster. And I've had the pleasure of meeting all of them um, on a couple of occasions, including Toaster, who very sweetly gave me some of his best doggy kisses. Of course, I had a roast beef sandwich on my fingers at the time because we had met for lunch. So that could have something to do with doggy kisses, but um, I don't care. He was really sweet and I enjoyed meeting him. And Natalie and Kent are really um, fun, and Natalie produces great content week after week, and I highly recommend her podcast. Um, then there's Jen Geigley Knits, who I discovered maybe 2 or 3 years ago by now. She lives in Iowa and chronicles her knitting adventures week after week. She's extremely consistent and really gets into some interesting things. And she travels some to some yarny events throughout the year. So I'd say that her um, craftivism is excellent and it's a really fun watch, and I highly recommend hers. It comes out every Saturday morning. Um, then I want to mention the Charm City Unicorns. Unicorns is spelled EWE, like a sheep, female sheep. Um, that is Shayla and Heather. Shayla is the owner of Black Pearl Magic, and if you've never seen one of her amazing vinyl bags, I would suggest that you definitely check them out. But the podcast is not about selling her bags, it's about what the two of them get up to with knitting and all their successes and foibles along the way. And they are really fun to watch. Um, then I enjoy Mark Vogel, his um, perspective on knitting as a man is really interesting, and how it influences the choices of what he knits. And he kind of talks through how his projects are going and how things make him feel. And he's really wonderful to listen to. He's also a professional singer, and I've had an opportunity to watch some of his performances online. So he's definitely well worth checking out. And then there's Two Sisters Knitting Talking Sheep. Not sheep, but you know, that other word that I won't say. Um, they are hysterically funny, and I really enjoy watching them. And they've been at this for maybe a year or so, and whenever they get together, there's a lot of laughter that ensues, and they definitely don't take themselves too seriously. So I really have fun when I'm watching them. Then Andrea Mowry, the wonderful designer, has a weekly podcast that she does called I'll Knit If I Want To, where she answers questions from people that submit through her newsletter, I think. And her answers to the questions are always extremely thoughtful, and I learn so much just by listening to her, even if I'm not knitting the project that she's talking about. Um, Along the same vein, in terms of the learning, um, I enjoy watching Roxanne Richardson, who explores antique knitting and the history of knitting and uh, various techniques she breaks down in a lot of detail. And so I feel like I learn an awful lot from her every time um, I tune into one of her podcasts. Um, then there is the crazy sock lady, Kay Litton, who hosts Summer Sock Camp that is going on right now. She knits an awful lot of socks every year. Um, I think she's up to probably high 30s so far for the year. That's an awful lot of socks to have made in 6 months. Um, I don't know how she does it, but um, her podcast is always just kind of fun to check out. It's a traditional one where she shows her works in progress, which is usually pairs of socks, and shows the ones that she's finished and talks about who she's going to give them to, and she shares a little bit about her family every week. And so it's a nice quick little diversion usually. um, Along the sock path is Earth Tones girl Denise, who has a fabulous tutorial for making socks that I have found really helpful. And she is just the sweetest person to watch and listen to. I've never met her, but I imagine that she must be as warm in real life as she is on her YouTube channel, and I really enjoy watching her. Um, then we have the Bakery Bears, which um, was started by uh, Kay and her husband Dan um, a number of years ago. I'm not sure when I started watching them, but their videos are really interesting because they combine not only the traditional knitting podcast elements, but sometimes we get a little bit of British history or recipes or yarn dyeing techniques if you're adventurous enough to try that. Um, Unfortunately, in February of this year, um, Dan, Kay's other half, passed away. And so she's going through that awful transition now of learning how to uh, survive on her own. And she's doing great. Um, and she's picked back up with the podcast by herself. And I really applaud her that she wants to keep everything going. And they also have a really nice Patreon channel where um, there's extra content that's offered. So it's definitely worth checking out. Um, then, of course, there's Kevin and Ray from Needles at the Ready. I enjoy watching the two of them. Kevin is a yarn dyer for Needles at the Ready yarn, and um, his yarns are beautiful. But the main reason why I enjoy watching them is that they don't really take themselves too seriously. And there's sometimes a little bit of silliness between the two of them back and forth, and I enjoy watching and supporting them. Um, then there's the Skein Scoop podcast, which um, is from Skein Yarn Shop in Rhode Island, and um, the two ladies that run Skein Yarn Shop share with us what they've been knitting and what other adventures they've gotten into, and then they show some things that are new or popular in the shop, which I really don't mind seeing because, for one thing, they have lots of really cool stuff that I like. So once in a while, I do admit that I have purchased from them. Um, that's where I discovered the Twinkle Dimple uh, Progress Keepers, and they're just so gorgeous. Um, then there's also known as Nora Knits. Nora is a extremely talented knitter and crocheter um, who lives on a small farm in, I think, Connecticut. I'm not sure about that, but um, she is a very adventurous maker and um, constantly is making things from what I would consider to be fairly advanced patterns, but modifying them to match her own fit and needs. And she's just so interesting um, to watch and see her projects take shape week after week. I really enjoy watching her. Um, then there's one that I just literally discovered this week called Melanie Knits for Fun. And Melanie lives in Arkansas, and she is a woman of a certain age, like me, which in the world of knitting YouTube channels and podcasts, there aren't that many people in what I would consider near to my age group. And she has a lot of the same cultural references that I do. And so far, I've only watched a couple of episodes, but she's definitely fun and captivating. And it was no problem at all for me to want to subscribe to her channel after watching only one episode. Then there is a lovely yarn by Amber who lives in Western Pennsylvania, and her podcast is just lovely, like the title says. Her projects are beautiful, and the scenery that surrounds her is gorgeous, and I just really enjoy watching her content as well. Then there's the Knit Girls. I don't know exactly when they started their podcast, but they have 700 and probably the high 700s worth of episodes. So that to me is amazing. That means they've been at this for quite a while, and um, they are always uh, making some fun things to look at, and it's always neat to know what they're up to. Then we have Mondays with Marley, which is a weekly show by Marley Bird and her business partner, Robin Chichula. Marley Bird is an amazing knitting and crochet teacher and designer, and she's always got stuff going on in the world of Marley Bird. And um, there's sales and promotions of her patterns and various things. And she's always very helpful, and the patterns are interesting and fun to knit. I've definitely done a few of them over the years, um, and I enjoy her content because she and Robin can sometimes just totally get up to some silly conversations. Sometimes it's not always silly. Sometimes they talk about the serious aspects of trying to maintain a business in this kind of world. And so it's interesting to hear her perspective. Um, let's see. Then we have two women yelling about knitting. This is one that I discovered um, probably a couple of months ago, and they do what they call a season of episodes, and the season consists of, I don't know, however many ideas over a short number of weeks that they have, and then they take a break, and then they reconvene for the next season. So far, I think there's been two seasons, and I'm certainly hoping for a season three because I enjoy their hot takes on a lot of things that are going on in the knitting world. Um, Along with hot takes about the knitting world, there is Aspen in the moment. Um, Aspen has done a lot of really interesting uh, videos about um, also things that are hot going on in the knitting community. Um, he's broken down some things about uh, Ravelry, and there was a knitting event that shall not be named a couple of years ago that was a disaster, and he gave an absolutely fabulous analysis of that event and why things went so terribly wrong. And so, if Aspen covers uh, a particular aspect of something that's going on in the knitting community, that it's usually a thoughtful analysis and very detailed, so you really feel like you know what's going on. And so I've totally enjoyed watching that channel as well. Also, there is Little Drops of Wonderful by Ali, who lives in Kent, England, and um, she posts fairly regularly about the things that she's up to with their making. Um, she also has a companion channel, This Little Wonderful Life, which is more like a life and daily vlog kind of format. Um, she keeps them separate so that people can focus on either the crafting content or the life content. Um, I watch both because they're both really good. Then we have um, Rachel is Knitting. Rachel is a person who hosts a lot of knitting tours um, in various places like Shetland and Ireland and Scotland. And I believe she's going to Denmark and Spain later this year. And she always puts up a series of videos about the knitting tours that she hosts. So I feel like I've gotten to see a lot of interesting places and interesting things that I might not get to see because I don't travel to that extent. But I really enjoy watching her content. And then when she's not traveling, she has a weekly update podcast about her um, progress on her various projects and how she feels about them. And her wit is funny and her degree of snark is perfect. And I really enjoy watching Rachel. Um, and because I watch Rachel, I also watch Leslie of Knit California. The two of them are friends, and they live pretty far apart. So their content is different, but sometimes commingled because Leslie occasionally goes on the trips that Rachel hosts. Um, but Leslie is very thoughtful about her projects, and she also has designed a few things. Um, and she's a huge Taylor Swift fan, which I've decided to forgive her for that. But oh well. Anyway, um, then we have Finished Knitting Stories, hosted by Jana, who lives in Finland, and um, She is a very prolific knitter, and I think she owns a yarn shop in Finland as well. And it's really interesting to see her projects progress from week to week and to hear about life in her corner of the world where it's either light all the time or dark all the time. And yes, that can have an impact on how she's feeling. But it's a really fun podcast to watch, and I never miss it. Um, then we have A Homespun House by Molly, and um, I watch her when she posts. She kind of posts for a bunch of weeks in a row, and then she takes a breather. Like right now, it's probably summer vacation for her family and her kids, and so they're probably busy, and I haven't heard from them in a few weeks. But um, in any case, her projects are interesting, and she is also a yarn dyer, and her yarns are beautiful, and so I enjoy watching her. Um, then we have um, Chapel Hill Maker. This is a relatively new podcaster from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who makes some really beautiful things and um, shares a bit about her life from week to week. And I love seeing her project progress and hearing about the modifications that she makes to her work. Um, then there's Allie Makes Everything. She's from Toronto area, outside of Toronto, and listening to her is a little bit different because not only does she update us on her projects and her progress, but she keeps track of what it actually cost for her to make her knitted projects, and then based on the number of times that she wears a particular garment, she breaks down the cost per wear of what her knitting hobby is. And she, I guess, wears her knits a lot because eventually the cost is extremely affordable, but sometimes it takes a while to get there. Um, then there's Watch Barbara Knit. I adore Barbara. She makes, she's a knitwear designer and designs a lot of shawls with interesting stitches, sometimes stitches that she sort of invents or unvents herself. And she also hosts a weekly live chat on YouTube for her subscribers, and it's always a lot of fun. Um, Barbara enjoys some of the what I would call nerdy things, like um, I know that she enjoys like sci-fi conventions, and um, she has a little Star Wars or Star Trek action figure, Commander Riker, who models a lot of her tiny shawl samples that she knits up. It's kind of cute. You have to be there to see what I mean. But Barbara's a lot of fun, and I enjoy being part of her community. Um, and then there's a couple of really important crochet related podcasts that I watch. And yes, you heard me say several times now, I don't crochet anymore, but I understand the craft of crochet, and I still enjoy watching these couple of podcasts. The first one is TL Yarn Crafts, hosted by Tony Lipsy, who is an amazing crochet teacher and designer. And she just had the major accomplishment of having 1 million subscribers to her uh, web channel. So that was a major accomplishment for her. And she has a lot of hot takes on things that are going on in the yarn industry. And it's always fun to watch her. and it's especially fun when she invites her mom to join her. And I really enjoy watching her channel, even though I don't crochet along. Same thing with Elise Rose Crochet. That channel is hosted by Elise, who is an amigurumi or knitted toy designer, and her projects are interesting and fun, and the things that she gets into, like she will uh, pick up various knitting or crochet related products and review them. She reviews different yarns and compares different crochet hooks or whatever. And but her delivery is fun and lighthearted, and I really enjoy watching her. Um, so that is my list of knitting and crochet related uh, podcasts. Did I mention the Grocery Girls? The Grocery Girls are my sort of OG knitting podcast. They were one of the first ones I personally discovered, and I've been watching them since the beginning of their show, and they're still going strong. Um, I think maybe 9 or 10 years later, I'm not exactly sure, but they are a lot of fun to watch, and I never miss an episode of theirs, so I can highly recommend that you check out the Grocery Girls. But wait, Trish, is it only knitting or crafting or crochet projects YouTube channels that you watch? Nope. There are a few that are not yarn related at all. So let me talk to you about them. First, there's one called Rewilding Jude. Jude is the former owner of Stranded Dye Works in the UK, and through a couple of really sad events in his life, he decided to uh, close up his business and move to a rural area of Scotland. And he now lives in an old stone cottage that has lots of things that need to be fixed up. And so we watch his adventures every week as he turns his tiny little stone cottage into a place that is more habitable for himself. And he's getting ready to embark on some major renovations. But at the same time, there are chickens and a cat and lots of cooking and baking and all kinds of things all mixed in. And it's not a thing about yarn, but it's about his life in rural Scotland, and it is so fascinating. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy watching it. Then there's Mama Dr. Jones, who is a practicing OBGYN who was practicing in the state of Texas, and I think became so disillusioned by the state of healthcare in the United States that she actually left the country and went to New Zealand and is now practicing there. But she posts a lot of um, interesting, creative, and very informative content about women's health, and has a lot of really important things to say and to educate women about their own bodies. So um, she's definitely worth checking out as well. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue tied. Next on my list is legacy.com, deaths in the news. I know that sounds morbid, but I do kind of keep up with that particular site, and they mostly focus on um, celebrities who've passed away or major events in the news that involve um, deaths, like military accidents or um, unfortunately mass shootings, which is a sad way of life in the United States. I hate to say that, but it's true. Anyway, then there is the history guy, because history deserves to be remembered. Lance puts out about 3 shows a week, and each one deals with a specific topic in history that he dives into as much detail as 15 or 20 minutes each episode will allow. And I have learned an awful lot about um, everything from the Revolutionary War to the history of hot dogs. Yes, it's very interesting if you enjoy learning something every time. Then we have the Professor of Rock, Adam Reeder. Um, has a lot of content about popular music and many interviews from the people who make the music themselves. And I absolutely enjoy his content. I love music, and um, day after day, he just puts out one amazing thing after another. And man, sometimes I wish I could be a fly on the wall when he's interviewing some of my musical heroes. Um, then we have um, Jamie Dodger, who is a man living in the UK, um, and his area of focus is helping people to have greater understanding about what it means to be a transgender person. And his content is very educational and enlightening, and I find his perspective very interesting. So I always enjoy watching him and seeing what he has to say. Um, then we have the Little House on the Prairie 50th Anniversary Podcast. This actually started 2 years ago. It's now been 52 years. The podcast was so popular, they decided to keep making it, and I'm kind of glad they did. Um, the main people on the podcast week after week are Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson, and Dean Butler, who played Almanzo Wilder. Yes, Almanzo is the uh, proper pronunciation of Laura Ingalls Wilder's husband's name. Um, they discovered this after having made the first episode where they called him Almanzo. On the episode, they found an actual recording of Laura Ingalls Wilder's voice where she mentioned the name of her husband, but they said, okay, he's Almanzo on television, and that'll be that. So they make jokes about Almanzo, who is this guy? Anyway, when I was a kid, The Little House on the Prairie was my favorite TV show. I don't make apologies for that, and I enjoyed watching it week after week. So hearing them recap the episodes 50 years later, or to talk about the people on the show, or the production and things that happened while the show was in production, or sometimes um, being able to interview some of the surviving cast members. They've had just about everybody on their podcast by now, and it really is a lot of fun. And I enjoy watching that one week after week. Um, then there's one that I just started watching called Isaac Brown. He is a music producer in the Midwest who is definitely Gen Z, and who can believe it that he absolutely never listened to the Beatles growing up. And so recently he did a whole series where he listened to every Beatles album in order, and it was really interesting finding out what young kids today don't know about the music that came before them and how it shaped what they listen to now. So I find him amusing in sort of an old lady way, watching him discover the things that have been part of my life since the beginning. So that's kind of fun. Um, anyway, that, believe it or not, is my list. That's a huge amount of podcasts that I watch. Um, a couple that aren't really podcasts that I watch all the time. Um, I am sort of drawn into uh, true crime, like, um, I don't know, one of those people who can't resist seeing the gore on the other side of the road as long as it doesn't touch me. you know, I can't explain it, but I spend a lot of time watching Dateline online and also 48 Hours. Um, Both of them have a 24-hour feed of episodes of their shows that I watch a lot. and I've always sort of said that um, one celebrity that I hope to never meet in my entire life is Keith Morrison, who is one of the main guys on Dateline, because I know if I have occasion to meet him, it would probably be because something awful happened. So let's just keep him as far away from me as possible. But I still watch him all the time. Anyway, so yeah, that's an awful lot of content. And, I don't watch everybody every week because, frankly, there aren't enough hours in the week. But I do tend to have a video going while I'm knitting. Um, it helps with the solitary feeling of knitting by myself, that um, I have something to look at. So I tend to rotate in and out from week to week. This week I'll watch this group of people, and the next week I'll watch that group of people. There are a couple that I watch all the time, like Jen Geigley and the Love and Stitches podcast by Natalie. Um, but everybody else, it just kind of depends on what I feel like from week to week. And they definitely keep me busy. I do not watch television at all, but I do watch a lot of YouTube. So I don't know what that says about me, other than I can control what I watch and what I don't, rather than watching whatever is randomly on TV at any given time. So, but I do absorb an awful lot of media content. So I can't say that that makes me a better person than somebody that watches TV all the time, because it's kind of the same thing, just a different uh, group of media pieces. Anyway, so that's everything that I watch all the time. You asked Sue, and I gave it to you. There's a lot. So I hope you find some of it interesting. And I am including a list of links to all these people's YouTube channels. Um, I will be creating that list before this video goes live, so that you will be able to look these folks up pretty easily. Um, and I hope that you enjoy some of them. And if you do check anybody out, especially if you check out somebody new to you because of what I've offered up here, I would really love to hear about it in the comments below. So let me know what podcasts you listen to or watch and what you like. Um, I don't know. It's just something that keeps me engaged in my knitting. And um, so I don't know if it's something that would interest you as well. But if it does, great. Let me know about it. Um, I also listen to audiobooks while I knit, but that's a whole topic for another day. So anyway, that's about it for now. I've rambled on quite a bit longer than I did in last week's episode, and I look forward to um, hearing your feedback and learning about what you like. Um, it's been a pleasure uh, talking to you this week, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.